Yes, sir, it's live now.
Hi everyone, good evening. Hi, can all of you hear me? Hi Joginder, hi Sumit. All of you can hear me and see me as well, right? Okay. Okay, so it's already, we'll just wait for 1 more minute, right? Let others join and then start. So Sumit and Joginder, are any exams going on currently? Okay. Hi Shubhendu. Okay, so it's 7 not 3, so we'll get started. So today is our live session 4, and we are going to discuss about network optimization in this lecture. Hi Shubhendu, good evening. So let's quickly look at the agenda of today's session. So this is, I think now, by this time you would be familiar, right, in terms of content that what we are trying to cover. So in session 1, we had gone through the introduction of this course, which was to see the application of analytics in supply chain and logistics. And then we said that we are going to talk about three elements, three verticals in supply chain in detail, right? And look at how analytics and several framework are applied. So we said that we are going to look at forecasting, demand forecasting. We are going to look at inventory optimization, and we are also going to look at logistics optimization. So in session 1, we spoke about demand forecasting, qualitative forecasting. In session 2, we spoke about quantitative ways of generating a forecast, causal forecasting as well, and what are the various challenges, right, in getting the right forecast given the historical data that we have or given the context that we have. And in session 3, we started discussion on the inventory management, right, inventory classification. So we reached to a certain level, and there is some content that is left to be discussed in inventory optimization. So what we will do is that we will start from where we left last time, and then we have two topics to cover in logistics optimization, which is facility optimization and the route optimization that we are going to cover, right? So this is what we have done till now. So we had 4 sessions in all, and of which one session was the briefing session regarding the HBR simulation of root beer game. And today is the session 4, and one important update that the debriefing session, right? I think the deadline that you have to complete your simulation is end of tomorrow. And after that, we are going to have one debriefing session on Tuesday. And earlier the time was 8 to 9, but there's a new time slot for the discussion, which is 9:30 to 10:30. So please ensure that I think this would have already been communicated to you guys, from the backend team. But this is so are you aware of this already? Anu, Priyanka, Joginder, Steven, Sumit, are you all aware of this new timing for the debriefing session? Okay, so please take a note of this. So this is going to happen from 9:30 to 10:30. Okay. Okay. So let's quickly go back to first, some of the content that is left from the inventory optimization, and then once we cover that, we'll move to our logistics optimization content. Okay. So while I will not go through the whole piece of inventory management, but I'll just quickly, run through what we had already seen. So, you guys are able to refresh. And anyways, at the end of this session, we are going to look at, the whole course in totality, just to refresh what we have learned, right? So this was the agenda of our previous session, wherein we said that we are going to look at two important aspects. So one was inventory management and second was inventory optimization. And within inventory management, what we did was we went through a lot of basics, right? So we understood what the definition of inventory is in terms of raw material, packaging material, the work in progress, right, and your maintenance, repair material, right, and plus your finished goods, right. So all of this put together is called as inventory for any organization. And we understood what inventory management is, right, which is the management of inflow and outflow and the storage of all of these kinds of inventories called as inventory management. Then we understood a very important concept. So we made a comment that inventory is equal to cost is equal to money. So if you are not able to sell the inventory at a desired price, right, it's a liability for you. And the liability has a lot of impact in terms of the working capital, which has already got locked in form of raw material, packaging material, and other, supporting element, which has helped you to convert that into a finished product. Along with that, if you hold inventory for a long period of time, if there's a shelf life attached to it, it's a bomb, right, which you are sitting on, because once the shelf life is over, nobody is going to buy that inventory, and you have to either damage or destroy that inventory, which also is not free, right. And there are other associated cost also with inventory, right, which is inventory carrying cost, right, inventory holding cost, right. And obviously with every passing minute, you're also losing out on opportunity to sell the inventory at a MRP or at a retail price. So you will have to sell the inventory at a liquidation price, which could be even lesser than your cost of good sold, or the rate or the price at which you are or the cost at which you are manufacturing it, right. So it is very important to understand, this equation of inventory equal to cost equal to money. And the whole discussion, right, around the application. And you will see that in most of the use cases that we are talking about when we talk about inventory management subject is to optimize the inventory that we have to carry to run our operations. While we understand that carrying inventory has a certain benefit, right, and in fact there are a lot of benefits of keeping inventory, but at the same time we also understand the trade-off involved or the risk involved in keeping that inventory, right. So we have to balance the trade-off, right, and all the use cases, all the problem statement which will require all of you to apply analytics, look at data and come out with solutions, would be around optimizing the inventory, right. And when we talk about optimizing the inventory, there are several aspects that you have to answer, and it will appear to you in form of different problem statements, right. This problem statement could be around how much inventory should we carry, right, to support a certain level of operation. When I say certain level of operation, a certain service level, right. So if you want to be, a manufacturer, if you want to be an organization who wants to provide 100% service levels, right, to your customers, then you will have to carry a certain amount of inventory, right. So how much do you stock, right? Where do you stock, right? Do you stock, inventory at every node in your supply chain, right? So how much you are going to stock, where you are going to stock, right? When are you going to place order, right? When you are placing an order, how much of it you are going to place, right? So all of these problem statements are linked to various other elements in supply chain around demand variability, lead time variability, right? and various other complications involved in terms of holding cost, right, opportunity cost and carrying cost. So we will see how all of these aspects around inventory make this really a challenging statement to solve, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to sit on too much of inventory, and at the same time you don't want to carry so less inventory that most of the time you are out of stocks, right? And you will be definitely out of stock, because we know one thing for sure, that forecasters are not 100% accurate. So there will be times when the demand will be more than what you had anticipated, right? And in those cases, if you don't have enough inventory with you, it will be opportunity loss, and we know what is the cost of opportunity loss in long term, right? So so last time we saw various benefits of holding inventory, right? So economy of scale. So when you buy in bulk, vendors are willing to give you discount, vendors are willing to give you a good service, vendors are maybe willing to give you premium set of services, right? Pre-sale, after sale services, right? All of that. It helps you drive production smoothly, right? So sometimes we understand that there could be a quality issue with the raw material, packaging material received from the vendor, and there could be an issue in the total quantity which has been received. A vendor could supply you short quantities, right? A vendor could also make a late delivery to you, right? So when such kind of mishaps happen, and if you are holding a good buffer inventory with you, or you are able to get past all of these variabilities involved in a supply chain and not let your operations impact, right? So this is a very good visual way to see, wherein we said that the ship is more like an order. You can visualize the ship to be an order, and your job is to ensure that this order sail successfully from one shore to another shore, right? And what are the hurdles involved, how what can stop you from fulfilling this order, or making this order reach from one place to another, which is or getting an order and executing an order, right? So supply disruptions can be one blocker, right? You don't have supplies, order doesn't get fulfilled, right? Your production lines are getting breakdowns, right? So you are not able to produce. Okay. Process is not functioning smoothly, right? There is a lack of information, or the departments are not communicating to each other, right? So because of a shabby process, or because of a low quality or a poor process, there are impacts all around, right? Which is impacting the execution of the order, right? There's a demand spike, right? There's a poor quality of the product which has been produced. So all of this can stop you, right? And these are basically shown as stones here. And what is this blue color is the inventory, right? Or the safety stock that you carry at any point of time, which helps you sail through all of these problem statements, right? So this is what we saw. We also saw that some of these questions which I mentioned earlier, how much to stock, where to stock, how much to order, when to order, right? All of these depends upon lot of various elements, right? So most important elements or variables or decision variables involved in answering this question is the lead time, right? From the vendor, from the supplier, right? Variation in demand, variation in lead time. Is there a limit? Is there a limitation or a constraint in terms of minimum order quantity which a supplier or which a vendor can supply, right? So anything which is below minimum order quantity cannot be supplied. Is there a constraint, or is there an element of shelf life involved, right? So if the product shelf life is only 2 days, you cannot keep more than 2 days of inventory, right? How far the source is located, right? Is it a local source? Is it an international source? Is the inventory being sourced only from single supplier, or the inventory is being sourced from multiple suppliers? So it is called as mono source or multi source. That can also complicate this decision of how much to keep, where to keep, when to order, and how much to order, right? So last time we also saw some of the very important processes involved in inventory management, right? So this anyways, we mentioned, what should be the optimum level of inventory to sustain the operations, right? How do you control your inventory? And when we say inventory control, again, back to the same question, when to order, how much to order, what is the degree of control you are going to exert, right? And we saw that it is very important to look at a certain framework or adopt a certain framework, right? Because you might be selling 50,000 SKUs as an organization, and you may not have the manpower, or you may not have enough systems, right, to focus on all 50,000 SKUs in a similar manner. So you have to do some framework analysis, right, in terms of ABC analysis, right, in terms of Fsn analysis, VED analysis, or XYZ analysis, to find out those specific SKUs where you need to exert more control, right? And we had seen a lot of frameworks last time. And how do you exert inventory control in terms of reconciling the physical inventory versus what do you have in system, right? So other concepts, and most of these concepts, I think you would already seen in your operations and supply chain management course. This was just a refresher that we did last time. So we discussed what bill of material is, which is a document, right, mostly available in systems, SAP system or any other production system, where it specifies the ingredients and the respective quantities required to convert raw material and packaging material into a finished good. It doesn't specify the sequence of the process. Then we discussed, what is the mechanism of outflow of inventory, right? It could be first in, first out. It could be last in, first out, depending on the situation. And then we said that there are lot of inventory records which are maintained by manufacturers, right, or distributors or retailers. So these could be what inventory is received, what are the requirements, what inventory is already on hand, what inventory is stock in transit, right? And when we studied about manufacturing process last time in operations and supply chain management, we saw that to calculate the net requirements, we had seen, right, a supply planner will see how much inventory is already on hand, how much is coming from the factories, right, how much is WIP, right? So by taking into account the inventory which is already in process or stock on hand, the net requirement is calculated. And if these records are not accurately managed, right, in systems, then your net requirement calculation can also be wrong, right? And when these net requirements are wrong and you end up communicating it with your upstream supply chain partners who are factory planners, right, who are raw material packaging material planners, they can also end up making wrong decisions, right? And if these wrong decisions can result into either stockouts or excess inventory, and we know there are consequences of both, right? And like I said, that why topic of inventory is so tricky, why topic of inventory is so important for operations and supply chain management, because it can directly impact your profitability, right? And we know from our previous learning and the current learning that 60 to 70% of the cost, especially in the manufacturing based organizations, is managed by operations department, right? Because of the heavy cost involved in raw material, packaging material, right? Manufacturing variable cost, the transportation cost, warehousing cost, right? All of these costs are managed. And we know from MRP to gross margin, all of these costs are involved, right? So if you're selling it at 100 rupees and almost 80% of the cost has gone into raw material, packaging material, manufacturing variable cost, right? Transportation, logistics, distribution, inventory, carrying cost. So you sit on very low profit margins, right? Wafer thin profit margins. And if you manage to screw, or if you manage to mess up with the inventories, right? So your profitability, directly get impacted. So it's a very tricky, it's a topic which is very close to the hearts of operations and supply chain managers, right? So we had seen last time that inventory, when we talk about a lot of costs are associated: ordering cost, carrying cost, understocking cost, and overstocking cost. And I think some of these costs you had already seen in your previous course when you had done the global simulation, right? Wherein in the production room, whenever there was a stock out or whenever there was a excess inventory, you could see the impact, right, on the gross margin. I think you've already done that simulation. So we went through one case study wherein we saw that for one of the biggest retailers, how difficult it is to manage the SKUs, right? And how, having so many SKUs, right, or SKU proliferation, right? The right word is SKU proliferation, which is the exponential increase in the number of SKUs that retailers are dealing with, the kind of issues, right, it can have, right? So in terms of purchasing, inventory, stocking cost, markdown cost, right? And this is what we discussed. and how this particular retailer was, looking at taking initiatives to reduce the number of SKUs being sold, reducing the variation in the lead time, right, improving forecast accuracy, right, cutting down, on the complexity involved. And this is exactly what we had seen or we are going to discuss, right? So it's all about optimizing the inventory to maximize the business potential, right? So a very clear trade-off is involved, and for that, and companies who can manage that trade-off very well, right, day in day out, are the ones who succeeds in the market. Otherwise, the companies who end up messing with the inventory and not able to manage this trade-off, they quickly wrap up from the market and declare themselves bankrupt. Yeah. So this is what we had seen last time. So we said that it is impossible for an organization to focus equally on each and every SKU that they are dealing with or that they're selling to customer or consumer. Hence, it is very important for them to be clearly aware of what SKUs are very important for them to focus, right? What are those SKUs that if inventory is not focused, can make or break a case for them. And at the same time, there are going to be certain SKUs that even if, they have excess inventory or they have less inventory, they are okay, right? Because it is not going to impact that much, right? So it is very important for every demand planner, every supply planner, every customer service guy, every single person in supply chain to know which SKUs are those, which are the SKUs where it is very important, right, to uh, focus on inventory, various aspects of inventory without any error, right? So we said that there are 4 frameworks, and all of these 4 frameworks look at some very different element of inventory for the classification purpose, right? And as the supply chain analyst or as the business analyst, we have to take a call. It is left to best. It is left best to us to decide which framework has to be deployed when, right? And that is where our value add comes, right? All of these frameworks are publicly available, right? I mean, you don't need this course to understand what are these classification. I mean, it is publicly available. But what is important is to be able to say, okay, out of these 4 frameworks, this is the framework which will fit best in this situation and will give us the maximum, support in taking a particular decision, right? So we saw basically there are 4 types of inventory classification. The most common is ABC, right? And ABC is based on a very popular principle called a Pareto Principle, right? Wherein we say that about 20% of the SKUs contribute to 80% of the business, right? So which means that there are vital few and trivial many, right? This is the bottom line, right? This is the core theme of ABC or Pareto Principle. So there are only vital few and trivial many. And when we say vital few, so let's say you have 100 SKUs, only 20 SKUs are contributing to 80% of your business. So obviously you are going to focus a lot on those 20 SKUs rather than on the left, the balance 80 SKUs, right? So you can do a very simple analysis. And last time we had seen an Excel working wherein we saw how basis the value contribution to your business over last certain months, right? You can say, okay, this SKU is my A class SKU, this SKU is my B class SKU, and these percentages are not fixed percentages, right? So I told you last time that organizations can use a very different threshold also. So they may say that, okay, whatever SKU contributes to top 70% contribution will be my A class. From 70 to 90 could be my B class, and my last 10% contribution be C class, right? So it's not a fixed threshold. I mean, it has to be seen from a respective context, right? The other example which I told you was that there are organizations who has created ABC into another. So it's a 3 bucket classification, right? But there are some organizations who will also do one more classification within A class. So they will do A and A plus. So what is the meaning of A plus? A plus will be those SKUs which are contributing to, let's say, 90%, right? So they are even more premium, right? So so this basically ABC classification is using the business contribution as a uh, differentiating or the base to do that classification, right? The other is the VED classification, which is vital, essential, and desirable. And this is basis the criticality, right? So some of or the operations could be there in your manufacturing facility, or some other places where you identify, okay, these SKUs or these raw material are the vital, without these our operations cannot run, right? And you then deploy your policy, your protocols, in a similar fashion. Fsn classification is basically the rate at which your SKUs are selling, right? So when we say rate of consumption, right, you may decide, okay, an SKU which is selling 5,000 units, more than 5,000 units in a month are going to be called as fast moving. Anything which is between 5,000 to 3,000 are going to be called as slow moving. Anything which is below 3,000 are going to be called as non-moving, right? So this is the rate of consumption. Now, ABC and Fsn classification could be very different. So there can be an SKU which is A class, but it is slow moving, right? Similarly, there can be an SKU which is B class but fast moving, right? Because the element that they are using, respective frameworks are different, right? And hence your ABC and Fsn classification can be different for the same SKU, right? And then there's an XYZ analysis. This we had seen during our demand forecasting class also, right? Session also, wherein we said that XYZ analysis can be used for demand segmentation also, right? So this talks about the inherent variability which exists. So Z class SKUs are those SKUs which are highly variable, right? And X class SKUs are those which are stable, which are easy to predict, right? And they are basically dependent on the inherent variation in the demand, right? So we analyze last 6 months or 12 months of data, and we calculate something called a coefficient of variation, which is basically a ratio between standard deviation and the mean, right? And this coefficient of variation, if it is small, if within a certain range, we call it as a pretty stable SKU and easy to forecast, right? So what we did last time was we looked at one Excel working, wherein we saw how ABC classification is done, Fsn classification is done, and XYZ classification is done. And this is what we had anyways discussed, right? We're not going to go through every single point here. What we said was all of these classifications, why are we studying all of these classifications, right? We are studying or we are trying to know more about these inventory classification method, because every classification helps us take certain actions. Okay. So for example, you find out, there's an SKU, and this is a Z, let us say X class SKU. So you have done XYZ classification and you find out that it's an X class SKU. Now for an X class SKU, will you hold more inventory or less inventory? What will be your decision? Will you hold more inventory or less inventory to take care of, let us say, variability in demand or variability in supply? For an X class SKU, are you going to hold more inventory or less inventory? Hello guys. Okay, Priyanka is saying I'm going to hold less inventory. And why is that, Priyanka? Why will you hold less inventory for X class? Okay, X means low variability. Okay, so what does it mean in terms of inventory? Right, so when you say stable demand, right? So when we say X low variability, it is stable demand. And why? And we had seen last time, right? Why do we hold inventory? We hold inventory because we want to take care of the mismatch between demand and supply, right? So here XYZ is only talking about lesser demand, right? And if you have a fairly predictable demand, you don't want to keep a lot of inventory, right? Because if it is going to sell 100, it is actually going to sell 100. So why should I keep 120 or 90, right? Okay. So similarly, when let's say you find out that an SKU is fast, slow, or non-moving, right? So for a non-moving SKU, are you going to keep any inventory or not? For a non-moving SKU, are you going to keep any inventory? Are you going to keep high inventory or low inventory? Steven is saying low, right? Because anyways, it is Yeah, very low, right? So when you combine, right, ABC with Fsn and XYZ, you will take certain decisions, right? And these decisions are very important because this will formulate the policy, this will formulate the framework for the inventory calculations, right? So how much you will keep as safety stock, how much of it you will, keep as the buffer, to take care of variabilities are going to be some of the important points, right? Okay, so what we had seen last time, that all of these classifications really help you take certain actions, certain calls. These calls are around safety stock, how much safety stock you want to keep. You will also take certain calls on how much service level you want to offer to your customer, right? So let's see this, right? So if it's a ABC classification, would you want to offer the maximum service level on C class or A class? Would you want to offer the maximum service level to your customers for A class SKUs or C class SKUs? A class, right? No brainer, right? Because for C class SKU, why will we keep that high inventory, right? Because they are anyways not contributing to business so much, right? So see, I mean, here it is written, right? So due to the high value of product, service level has to be defined accordingly for A category products, right? Service level is kept high for vital products, right? Safety stock is optimized for fast moving products, right? While rarely any safety stock is kept for non-moving products, right? Safety stock is kept low for both X and Z category. X we know because the uncertainty is low, and Z because uncertainty is so high that it really makes no sense to keep high inventory, right? Because don't know which side the tables are going to turn, right? For a Z class SKU, hence each of this classification helps you take certain decisions around your safety stock, around the service levels that you want to keep. Okay, so ABC, so one of this we had seen in detail, right? So this anyways I mentioned that based on Pareto Principle, critical few, trivial many, right? And in terms of inventory control, for example, organization may decide that they're going to spend most of their purchasing resources, right, on A class item rather than on C class item. They're going to have more stricter, more rigor and more governance in terms of physical inventory control for A class SKUs. Similarly, they might want to spend a lot of time, lot of investment, right, and get some capable people to be able to give them a very good forecast for A class items, right, rather than B and C class items. Okay, so last time we saw a detailed case study, right, which was about identifying, right, which SKUs are not making sense for any organization to sell, right, anymore, right? And this is called as SKU rationalization exercise, which is done by a lot of companies, right? So it's done by Unilever, it's done by Nestle, Marico, right, P&G, almost all very big top organizations, right? They are done by retail setups like Big Bazaar, More, and Reliance, right? Because they are the number of SKUs that they sell are actually too many. So they want to constantly look at those SKUs which are not making any more sense for them to sell, right? And this decision of what is not making any more sense to sell is basis lot of factors, right? So we saw it could be dependent on contribution to business, gross margin, inventory turns, right? Demand variability can lead into production complexity, right? Whether it is being coming from mono or multi-source, which is another level of complexity, right? And we try to quantify all of these aspects to calculate a normalized score. And for SQs where our score is minimum, we try to propose to sales and marketing team to say, okay, let's stop selling these SQs, because while these SQs are bringing a top line to us, but at the same time, it is adding to complexity. And if we see the net profitability by selling these SQs, it is not giving us any advantage, right? So I'd shown you these five these steps, right, leading to a normalized score. And while this is one specific approach, but companies can look at combinations or add more number of variables based on the data that they have with them, right? But the idea here is to just tell you that this is a very important exercise, and it is done not every 15 days or every week, but this is something which is done maybe, let's say, quarterly basis or half yearly basis, to identify that tail set of SKUs which are not making any sense for the retailers or manufacturers to offer to consumers. Okay, so now I think this is where we left, right, our discussion. So we'll continue here, right? So what we are now going to discuss is the safety stock, right? And safety stock is a very important concept, right, in inventory optimization and inventory management. And safety stock is seen as a buffer, right? It is a buffer stock, right, which helps manufacturers, which helps retailers, which helps distributor address variabilities. And when we talk about variabilities, the variability can originate, or it can come from either the demand side or it can come from the supply side, right? So sometimes demand can be more than what we have expected, it can be less than what we have expected. Lead time, supplier can either deliver early or supplier can deliver late, right? So there can be variation from both the sides, and when we know when the variation comes from any of these sides, our capability to service an order gets impacted, right? If demand is higher than what we had expected, and if we don't have stocks, we will not be able to execute. If supplier has made a late delivery, right, we are not able to execute, right? So safety stock really helps us solve that problem statement, right? But the question here is that how much safety stock should you have, because you cannot have infinite safety stock, right? Because if you keep infinite safety stock, I mean, all your working capital gets logged and variability may not be that high, right? And you have basically wasted your organizational resources, right? So if you look at safety stock basically takes into account like I said, that variability in demand, variability in supply, and it also takes another factor, which is the commitment to the service level, right? So like I said, that there are some important SKUs for which you would want to have service levels of 95% and above, right? So which means that 95% of the time you want to service orders for those SKUs, right? And then there could be certain SKUs wherein you may say, okay, I want to only, I'm okay as long as I'm able to service 80% of the orders. And even if I'm not able to fulfill 20% of the orders, I'm okay, right? Because these, to manage the other 20%, you have to keep a lot of inventory, and for a B class or C class SKU, maybe that is not making sense from profit point of view, right? So if you look at mathematical equation of the safety stock, it is dependent on 5 variables, right? So what are these variables? So one is your service level. So you first define that what service level you are going to offer for a certain SKU, and how do you decide a service level? Using the classifications which we had seen, right? So depending on whether SKUs ABC, FSN, or fast moving, slow moving, non moving, right, and the variability, you say, okay, what is the safety stock, or what is the service level that I am willing to offer on certain SKU. And basis that service level, what we do is that you calculate something called a Z score or Z factor, which is the inverse probability distribution of alpha, right? So this alpha is nothing but a service level, and this can be referred to against a certain level. What is this factor can be referred to by looking at a probability distribution table. And if you look at this formula, which is a square root of sum of two calculated numbers, right? So your first figure is talking about average lead time into standard deviation in demand, right? So this is talking about standard deviation in demand, right, which is variability in demand. And the second equation is about average demand, right, which is average demand for that SKU into standard deviation in the lead time, right? So like I mentioned, that safety stock is a function of variability in the lead time and variability in the demand, right? And if you look at this in a graphical manner, right? So if you look at this particular chart on the left, so what it specifies are two things, right? So on the x-axis you see time, on the y-axis you see inventory level, right? And what you see here is as time passes, right, inventory, right? So what is with every passage of time, your demand is coming and your inventory is getting consumed, right? So let's say when you are starting, you have a certain inventory, right? And as time is going, your inventory levels are coming down because your demand is there and you are billing this inventory to your, let's say, distributors or customers or whatever, right? So let's say inventory is coming down, inventory is getting consumed, or inventory is getting, depleted here. And now you have come to, let's say, this level, right? This level. Now, what is this point is that you have got the stocks from the seller or supplier or vendor, right? So your inventory levels are back to a certain point, right? But let us say you don't get a stock, right? So let's say this place, right? So lead time was this, but there's a lead time variability. There's a lead time variability, and supplier has taken a little bit more time in giving you the stock, right? Now, if you were in this situation and if the safety stock was not there, right? So this particular layer which you are seeing is the safety stock. If the safety stock was not there, right, what would happen at this point in time? What would happen at this point in time? You will run out of stocks, right? You will run out of stocks, right? So what the safety stock is helping you still being able to service the orders, still give you that little bit of, flexibility, little bit of buffer. And if this delay is there in lead time from a supplier, you're still able to manage the demand, right? So safety stock is a buffer stock, right? Most of the time we don't want to enter into this zone, right? But there can be inadvertent delay from the supplier. There can be cases wherein, let us say, demand is being consumed, inventory comes to a particular level, right? And here what is happening is the issue with the demand, right? So demand is not there, right? So what is happening is that you are sitting on the idle inventory, right? So there can be all the cases which are possible, right? But what safety stock helps you is to be able to manage the demand side and supply side variability, right? Okay. So what we will do is that we will let us do one thing. Okay, so let's look at I think one or two more slides, and then we will look at the models. Okay, or let's do one thing. Okay, so let's first cover the concepts, and then I'll take you through the demonstrations. I think that will be better, right? So now, if you remember last time, previously I had mentioned to you that when we talk about inventory optimization or inventory management, we are basically talking about how much safety stock we want to keep, right? So safety stock, now we have understood that it's a function of the variability in the lead time, variability in the demand, right? The other point that we want to understand is when do we place the order, right? So here, if you see, right, there is one level of inventory, right, which here it is called as safety stock, right? And then you see another line here, right? Now if you look at this particular point, right, and this particular point, here you will see that inventory has got replenished. There is an inventory receipt which has happened, right? But you would have triggered the order at a certain point before this timeline, and hence you got an receipt, right? So this is the point at which you triggered the order, right? This is the point at which you triggered the order. And when you triggered the order here, right, this is called as reorder point, right? So what happened when you triggered the order to the supplier here? You are depleting inventory, you're depleting inventory, you're depleting inventory. And when you came here, you got the receipt, right? So when you placed an order here and you got the inventory receipt here, this much of time has gone, right? So this is the time axis, right? So you placed an order here. So if we draw one straight line, to on the x-axis, we get, let's say, this time, and you got the inventory here. So when you draw straight line, so this is the time which has gone once between placing the order and receiving the goods from the supplier. So this is called a lead time, right? This is the reorder point. This is the reorder point. So one important aspect we said was, when do we place the order? So if you look at this point, right? So what is this point? This is the point below which if the inventory drops, you place an order, right? And what is this point? If you look at this, what is the inventory here? The inventory is the sum of safety stock. Inventory is the sum of safety stock plus this inventory which you are consuming in the lead time, right? So your reorder point is equal to safety stock plus your consumption in the lead time, right? So whenever inventory drops below a certain level, below this level, you will trigger the order, right? And when the lead time materializes, you get the quantity, right? So here what is not shown is the reorder quantity, right? So obviously when you are placing an order with the supplier at this point in time, you would be placing a certain quantity, right? Now there are multiple ways of how much order you have to place, right? So there can be, for example, an economic order quantity, which we will see how do we calculate, and that how much to order is a function of cost. Okay, so there's an inventory holding cost, there's an inventory carrying cost, right? There is a ordering cost involved, right? So how much to order is a function of the cost involved. It could also be a function of the minimum order quantity, right? So regardless of what you need, you are constrained by what supplier can provide, right? So if your requirement is 70, but supplier can provide minimum of 100, so you obviously have to every time place an order of 100 units, right? Similarly, the third constraint could be the replenishment time or the shelf life, right? If the shelf life of the product is 3 days, so the max order that you can place is the 3 days equivalent of the demand consumption, right? So if you look at the simple chart, from the simple chart, we can understand, the concept of safety stock, the concept of when to place order with the supplier, which is your reorder point, right? And how much to place an order, right? So if you look at the same, chart in two different ways, so there are two inventory models, through which, the inventory orders are placed. So one is called a fixed reorder quantity, right? So every time, whenever you are placing an order, right, you are placing an order of the fixed quantity, right? So you will see here, so there is a certain starting point, right? So you are consuming the inventory, and this is a point, reorder point, right? So you will see this is a reorder point. And what is a reorder point? It is safety stock plus demand during the lead time, right? Which we had understood from our previous chart. So you place an order here, and then the supplier is taking time. This is the lead time. You are still consuming the existing inventory that you have, and you have reached to a safety stock point. And fortunately here you are not consuming your safety stock, because in this lead time you got the material, right? So you got the material and you are back to your inventory levels. Again you are consuming, you come to this level, right? And then you place inventory, right? So this is how it is happening. And your the reorder quantity that you are doing, right, it's a fixed order quantity, right? Now there is a second model, right, wherein it is a fixed reorder period, right? So fixed reorder period is dependent on the time. Like I told you that there can be certain situations wherein the time replenishment could be a constraint, or the shelf life could be a constraint, wherein every 5 days you have to place an order, right? So here what will happen, you have a certain inventory, right? And your inventory is being consumed, and 5 days have gone, right? So regardless of how much you have consumed in first 5 days, you will get these stocks. Okay, then inventory is getting consumed. Now in these 5 days you have consumed more inventory, right, from the first case. But once 5 days have passed, again you have placed an order, right? So if you look at the first case and second case, it's a fixed order quantity. Here it is the fixed time quantity, and every time you are placing a different order quantity here, right? Now how much to order, right? So here we have understood few concepts, right? So we have understood safety stock, we have understood reorder point, what is the order quantity, and two different models, right? Now, like I told you, that how much to order is also a function of the cost involved, right? Because in the safety stock calculation, there is no cost fee element. It is only the variability in lead time and variability in your demand, right? and the service level which you want to offer to your customers, right? So if you look at the costs which are involved when we talk about inventory, right? So there are various types of cost, right? So one is called a holding cost. So as your inventory increases, your holding cost increases, right? And then there is something called as ordering cost, right? So what is meant by ordering cost? If your lot quantities are smaller, if your lot quantities are smaller or order quantities are smaller, you will end up placing more number of orders, right? And as your order quantity increases, you will be placing less number of orders, and placing less number of orders directly mean less cost, right? So you will see this graph, moving this way, which is set up, or the order cost reduces as your order quantity increases, and as your order quantity or inventory increases, your holding cost increases, right? So two different opposing for costing are there. And there's a third cost also, which is a product cost, which we assume is a constant cost, right? Per unit cost of product is same. Now if you add this cost, right? So for example, and for this much of inventory, what is cost going to be? Addition of this point, addition of this point, and it will result into this point on the graph. If you added this point, this will become this point on the graph, right? So what we are trying to say is that the resultant graph, there is a minimum point, right, at which your total cost will be minimum. And this is what will decide the optimum order quantity or the economic order quantity, right? So economic order quantity is going to be a function of your holding cost and your ordering cost, right? Along with your average annual demand or monthly demand, right? So like I earlier mentioned to you, that when we talk about inventory optimization, we talk about two aspects, right? Quantity optimization is all about how much safety stock you should carry, right? How much cycle stock you, and there's another element that we will see in the demo, something called a cycle stock. Or let me just explain you here itself, right? So if you look at this point, right? So this is the point where you started, right? And this is the point wherein you receive the goods, right? So you have consumed a certain inventory, right, in this period of time, and this is the inventory that you have consumed, right? So this is called a cycle stock. So cycle is that the time that has gone between receiving, the other lot. So if you look at again here, you have received the inventory, and next time you are receiving the inventory here. So in this cycle, you have consumed this much of stock, right? Here. So this much of stock, this is called a cycle stock. Okay. So the stock which you are consuming in every cycle is called a cycle stock. Okay. So there's cycle stock, there's safety stock, there's reorder point, and there's reorder quantity. Okay. So like I said, that in inventory optimization, it is about, how much quantity to hold, right? Where to hold. And when we talk about cost optimization, right? How much to order and when to order, right? So quantity optimization is a technique to analyze and classify the product based on previous demand history and accounting for uncertainty and taking certain calls, right? Around safety stock. And cost optimization basically takes into account the cost element. So quantity optimization will only take into account your demand and supply variability and the service factor involved. And cost optimization will take into account your ordering cost, your holding cost, and other associated costs, right? So these are two different types of problem statements dealt with by inventory managers, inventory analysts, right? And there's a clear trade-off involved when we in these decisions in terms of cost and service, right? So if you want to give more and more service levels, right, and we saw that safety stock is directly proportional to the service factor. So if you want to give higher service levels, your safety stock requirement will be higher, right? So, and if your safety stock is higher, your cost will be higher. Why? Because more inventory, more holding cost, right? We have seen here, right? So there's a trade-off involved between cost and service. So like I said that the certain classification that we had seen earlier, right? It helps you take certain calls on how much safety stock to keep, right? What is the inventory policy that you are going to design. So if you look at ABC and XYZ, this gives you a 3x3 framework, right? So you can first segment your SKUs on ABC axis, then you can segment on XYZ axis, and then you will have labels for every set of SKUs, right? So you will have certain SKUs which are mapped as C class, right, which are contributing very less to your business, but they're pretty stable, right? So they're low value, stable demands, right? Then for C class, you will have certain SKUs which are C class, but they are highly uncertain, right? So what inventory policy do you design around them, right? So for example, in A class itself, you have three types of SKUs, right? So you have pretty stable, you have fluctuating demand, and you have highly uncertain demand, right? So what is going to be a service level offering, within the same A class set of SKUs? So all of these decisions will be taken by the inventory manager and inventory analyst, right? So this is what I had explained earlier. So when we have to take decisions on how much do we order, we bring in the element of ordering cost and holding cost. So economic order quantity is calculated by using this formula, which is root square of 2 into D into K divided by H, where D is the quantity, right, of the product which is required. K is your ordering cost, right? So we had seen and H is your holding cost, right? Like I mentioned earlier, so how much to order is defined. It can be done by three methods. So economic order quantity, minimum order quantity, and the third method was the constraint in terms of replenishment or shelf life, right? So let's do what we can do is okay, we can cover the topic and then we can look at the demonstrations, right? So when we talk about the inventory management, right? Let's say we have to decide between which suppliers we have to choose from. So we bring in a concept of something called as total cost of ownership, right? So total cost of ownership doesn't just take into account the price at which the inventory is being offered. It takes into account a lot of other factors as well, right? So it could be so let's say you have to select between supplier A and supplier B, and supplier A is offering you the minimum list price of a product, but there are other terms and conditions which are not so positive, right? And in fact, post sale services are also not that great, right? So when you take into account, or you have to select, between suppliers or supplier selection strategy, you have to look at total cost of ownership, right? So one is called as the direct acquisition, right? So how much you are spending to acquire the goods from that particular supplier, right? Are you spending extra on transportation? Are you spending extra on logistics? Are you spending on the supplier's behalf on inventory responsibility, right? What is the ownership taken by the supplier, right? A supplier interested in doing some of the activities which can be a win-win situation for both supplier and manufacturer, right? What are the post ownership support which are given by suppliers? So when you combine all of these three elements, right, and evaluate them, which will result into a total cost ownership, and then you should take a call whether supplier is making sense in terms of doing business, right? So like I said, that cost is not the only element or factor which should be looked at. The kind of services in terms of right, on time delivery, the kind of flexibility a supplier can provide you in terms of taking a change in request in additional demand or rationalizing the demand, how agile or how quick supplier is in responding to your demand side, what is the quality level of the products that the supplier is providing, right? Because the supplier is giving you a very cheap price, but the quality is a big question. I mean, it's a wrong decision, right? So we'll see one example of how total cost of ownership is calculated to identify between the several suppliers, and why this concept is important, because it will directly impact the cost for your operations, right? The cost of your operations in managing inventory. Okay. So the last concept in inventory management or inventory optimization is the decision between push and pull strategy, right? So when we talk about the inventory management, we are talking about inventory being kept at various nodes in supply chain, right? And as organization, they can decide, right, a particular point in supply chain wherein it will be driven by or pulled by the actual demand by the consumer, and till that point or node in the supply chain, the stocks will be pushed as per the forecast, right? So let me give you an example. So let's say there are 10 warehouses, local warehouses, which are managed by an organization, and there is a main one regional distribution center, right? Now the demand from 10 warehouses, right, before a month start. So, or let's say, let's discuss an example. So let's say there's a consumer offer, and the consumer offer is buy one get one, right? And we are in the month of February, and the consumer offer is in the month of April, right? Now we already have a forecast for that consumer offer. So these buy one get one, the total demand that has come, from the sales, or let's say through a consensus process, is 1,000 units, right? And right now the demand that has come is equal for each of the warehouses or each of the cities, right? And these warehouses are, in each of the cities in terms of Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, right? And 10 warehouses or 10 cities, the demand is 100 units, right? And these 100 units per CFA, there are 10 CFAs or 10 warehouses, so 1,000 units demand for that consumer offer. And this is being serviced from a regional warehouse, let's say in Baddi or in Himachal Pradesh, right? So what is the right policy? So let's say the offer is going to get open from 1st of April. So should we send all 1,000 units to these 10 warehouses, regional warehouses, before 1st of April, all 1,000 units? So 100 units for Delhi, 100 units for Bangalore. Should we do that? As per the forecast, should we send 100 units to Delhi, 100 units to Bangalore, 100 units to Mumbai on before 1st of April? Warehouse should open with 100 units of promo. Will that be okay? Will that be an okay decision? Okay, Steven is saying if the demand is constant, yes. Will demand be the same for all cities? No. So it is not known whether demand is going to be consistent, not consistent. So there are two options, right? So one is that you send 100 units to, in advance, before 1st of April to each of the respective CFAs, right? The other option is that you first send 500 units. So maybe 50 units to each of the CFAs, 50 to Delhi, 50 to Bangalore, 50 to Mumbai, so you have deployed 500 units to downstream CFAs on 1st of April, and you have reserved 500 units at the regional warehouse, right? Now you are looking at the demand, because all 100 units per CFA is a monthly demand. So is there a sense in providing 100 units on 1st of April to Delhi? Because it is not going to sell 100 units on day one, right? Right. So there could be a smart decision, right? Wherein you say, okay, 100 is a monthly demand, but I don't know, it could be less or it could be more. And I have produced promo quantity as a fixed promo What is the problem statement or pain point with promo quantities? You always produce promo quantities, fixed quantities, right? If it is non-promo or if it is regular SKU, you can sell more, you can sell less, because there's a continuous supply, right? But promo quantities cannot be produced less or more. It is a fixed quantity, right? So now you know that 100 units, the CFA or city or area sales manager of that city is not going to bill 100 units on day one, right? So what is the point in sending 100 units on April 1? So the smart decision would be to let's supply only half of the forecasted quantities first, right? So 50 to Delhi, 50 to Bombay, right? And then monitor or observe demand. So let's say after 10 days, you identify that Delhi has sold only 5, whereas Bangalore has already sold 40. So are you going to now deploy more in Bangalore or more in Delhi? From the 500 that is there, right? So what you are doing is now you are supplying as per the demand driven, as per the actual demand, right? And not as per the forecast, right? So the point here, what is being made through this example is that when you are talking about inventory management, inventory deployment, inventory optimization, if everything is being driven, at every node of the supply chain by through a forecast, it can lead to lot of issues, right? So you have to decide, at which node, up till which node you are going to work on the forecast, and after what point in supply chain you are going to work, basis the actual demand, right? Because then it really helps you capitalize on, cases where sales is more or sales is less, right? So this is called as push or pull strategy, right? And the normal or the core theme that is decided, till what point in supply chain you should be driven by forecast, and after that you should be driven by actual demand, is by this framework, right? Push pull boundary. So you define this boundary. So let's say this is your supplier, this is your customer, and in between there are a lot of nodes, right? Distributors, retailers, warehouses, factories, right? And you have to decide a boundary wherein, push and pull exchange hands, right? So you can work on push strategy. And when we say push strategy, as per the forecast, wherein there is a low certainty, right? You have a pretty, good idea of forecast, because aggregated forecast are usually more accurate, right? So when you talk about, let's say, regional DC level forecast, you may be fairly confident that, okay, at a regional DC level, the demand is quite high. So I will replenish regional DC as per the forecast. But after regional DC, I'm going to forecast as per the actual demand. Within that also, you may decide to do 50% replenishment as per forecast and 50% replenishment as per demand, right? So it is very important, and it is a very complex decision to finally decide, right, what is going to be a push pull strategy within the supply chain. So I mean, there are organizations, right, which earlier were designed to or designed as pull systems, right? But now they have converted back to push pull systems, right? So for example, Amazon earlier did not have any warehouses, right? So when you are not having any warehouse, basically what you are saying is you are totally driven by demand. So once you are able to see the demand from a consumer, then you try to service the order. And once you get the warehouses, which means that you are keeping inventory as per a certain forecast in the warehouses, and then you are supplying or replenishing a certain regional DC or a distributor closer to a customer point basis the actual demand, right? So there are organizations who have gone back from push to push pull systems, and there are organizations who have gone back from pull to push systems, right? So what we have seen in theory, right, basis our last 1 hour of discussion, is the concepts around safety stock, right? Concepts around cycle stock. We had seen different classification methods. We had seen what is the reorder point. We had seen what is meant by reorder quantity, right? We had seen two important formulas of safety stock calculation, which is largely dependent on the lead time and demand variability, along with the service factors. And we had also looked at economic order quantity, which is calculated basis your inventory holding cost and inventory ordering cost, right? So now let's put all of these in perspective, right, to see how um, analytical managers who are using analytics, right, to arrive or to solve a particular problem statement, right, by applying all of these concepts. Okay, so let me just and one of the last concept that we had seen was the total cost of ownership, right? So let me open all the models and we will go one by one. Just stay with me. I'm opening all the files. Okay, so we'll be looking at okay, we'll look at 5 models, 5 demonstrations. So to just validate all the concept that we have learned. Okay. So the first thing what we understood was the safety stock, right? So let me first do the safety stock calculations. Okay. So can few of you confirm to me if you can see the Excel? Okay. Okay. So let's look at some of the data, right? So this we had seen earlier also, data when we spoke about ABC, XYZ and Fsn classification, right? So we have some categories, right? So let me just filter here. Right, so we have these categories of products: beverages, biscuit, chocolate, coffee, noodles, tea, wafers, and chips, right? So we have product description, we have product IDs, we have unit cost for the product, we have suppliers mentioned, and then we have lead time, right? So this is the lead time from the supplier, so about 10 days, right, to get this product. And there's a standard deviation also, right? So the standard deviation, so this is the average lead time, right? So this is supplier information. So we can see that this is the supplier, A to Z suppliers. And for example, supplier A is providing Sunfeast product, right? The lead time is 15 days. This is the standard deviation, right? And this is the average, right? And what is this average? This average is the average which is seen for this period, which is September to August period, right? So these are the supplier information. Similarly, we have information, in terms of demand lead time, right? So this is monthly demand of the products, right? So we have monthly demand and we have demand basis the lead time, right? So if lead time is 15, what is the 15 days of demand, right? Of that product, and we have also converted it demand to a daily demand, right? So now let's look at how much safety stock we want to carry for a particular SKU, right? So if you're talking about, let's say, Yippee masala instant noodle 65 gram, so we know the lead time is 10 days and there's a certain deviation to this lead time, right? This is the average demand per day, 36 units, and this is the standard deviation, right? And when we segment this product using different methods, right? So this comes out to be a B class product. Let me just please. Okay, so this comes to be a B class product. Z is highly variable, but it is fast moving, right? Basis the average demand. And what we are also seeing is the service levels, right? So basis the ABC segmentation, because it is a B class SKU, organization has decided that we want to give a particular service level, right? So this is, if a A class SKU, organization wants to fulfill 95% orders, right? So 95% of the order they should be able to fulfill at any point of time, right? If it is a B class SKU, 90% service level, C class SKU, 85% service level, right? But when it is very clear from this formula that they want to ABC classification, if they identify any SKU as A class, they want to keep service levels very high. Now let's look at XYZ, right? So if it is an X class SKU, which is a pretty stable SKU, there they want to keep 95%. So they no. So what is here? Yeah. So if it is X, it is 95%, and if it is Y class, it is 90, and if it is Z class, it is 85%, right? So if you look at here, it is highly variable SKU wherein they want to give 85% service level. And in case of fast and slow moving, it is a fast moving SKU, and for fast moving SKU, 95%. And for slow moving SKU, one second, for slow moving SKU, they want to, not able to see, it is 80, right? For slow moving SKU, it is 90%, and for non moving, it is 85%, right? Now, right now you don't look at this, right? So what we are doing is we are first calculating the Z score, right? So to calculate the Z score, right? And we saw that Z score is the inverse probability distribution score of a service level. So first they are taking an average of the service levels, right? So they are not taking ABC, XY, or FSN, they are taking average, and then they are calculating the Z score, right? So Z score is 1.2, let us say 28 for the first SKU. And now we want to calculate the safety stock, right? Safety stock formula is, let us say, this Z score. Z score is Q3, right? Which is our this score. And after that, we are converting, the square root of the average lead time into the variability in demand, right? Square. So we are applied that formula, right? Wherein we are, if you look at what the highlighted columns, so this is what the formula is consuming, right? So they are looking at the average demand. They're looking at the standard deviation per demand, right? And they're also using the average lead time and standard deviation in the lead time, right? In the product, okay? So this is basically the V score, which is dependent on the service levels and which is dependent on the lead time variability and the safety stock variability. Or lead time variability and demand variability, they have calculated a safety stock which is coming to 46 units, right? So likewise for every SKU, they are calculating a certain safety stock, right? Now, while it is a mathematical derivation, but you will see that now they are taking a call, right? While there is a safety stock requirement of 46 units, but they are saying we will not keep safety stock for this SKU, right? And how are they deciding whether they want to keep safety stock or not is here, right? So for example, if it is non-moving, right? If it is non-moving or any SKU, so let's come to this, right? If it is non-moving and it is a Z-class SKU, which is highly variable and it is not selling, right? It is not moving very fast. They don't want to keep any safety stock, right? So for these two categories, even if there is a safety stock requirement, they are taking a call that we don't want to keep safety stock, right? So they only want to keep safety stock for the rest of the combinations, which could be fast moving, which could be slow moving, right? And which belongs to XY category, right? So while they are calculating the safety stock, which will help them address the variability, but basis a given classification, they have decided that they will not keep any safety stock for these SKUs. Is this clear? Is this clear? Okay. So now let's look at other example of inventory optimization. Okay. So what we had seen earlier was the safety stock calculation, right? Now we are looking at, and if you remember that chart, right, wherein safety stock was a layer at the bottom, right? But here we want to understand that how much inventory we want to keep, right? Because safety stock is only to take care of the variability, but there is also stock that you need to have for that cycle, right? For to fulfill your average demand, right? So what is the total inventory that you will be carrying, right? So for example, for this product, unit cost is 5, it is coming from supplier A, the lead time is 15 days, right? And what you have is the 15-day equivalent of average demand, which is 561 unit standard deviation. You have demand average per day, right? The service level is 90%. Guys, just give me 1 minute. Okay, so what we are seeing here is in this case, so there is a demand for 15 days. So this is based on lead time, right? So it is taking supplier to 15 days to give you replenishment, right? So you need to have stocks at least to be able to manage those 15 days, right? Because without in those 15 days, supplier is not giving you anything, right? So what is your 15 days of average demand? It is 561 units. And there's a standard deviation as well, right? And then you have demand per average demand per day and standard deviation on a daily basis. You want to keep 90% service level, right? So while your average demand is 561, but you are okay with 90% service level and 10% stock out, right? And this is your monthly forecast, right? This average demand, 15 days demand, is basis your historical sales data, right? And this is your new forecast monthly demand that has come, right? So now it is very intuitive, right? So it is going to take 15 days for supplier to give you replenishment. So you need to have 15 days of inventory. So what is your 30 days of forecast? Your 30 days of forecast is 1143. So what is your 15-day requirement? You will divide it by half, right? So which is let us say 572, right? So 1143 if it is your monthly demand, right? And here the lead time is 15 days, which means that your 15 days, which is half a month demand, will come to 572 units. So you need to have 572 units with you to service 15 days of demand, because after that you will get the replenishment from the supplier, right? But do you really need 572? No. Why? Because manufacturer is saying I'm okay with 90% service levels, right? So what you can keep with you is 514, which is 90% of 572, right? So for 15 days of demand, you are expecting the demand to be 572, but manufacturer is saying, okay, we don't have to keep 572 because I am planning to give service level only of 90%. So for 572 demand, you will keep 514 units. You will need 514 units. On top of that, you are planning for a safety stock, and the safety stock calculation is basis lead time variability, demand variability, and service level, right? So which is coming as 34. So what is your total inventory that you will keep? You will keep your 15 days of requirement plus your safety stock, which is 548 units, right? So this is what your total stock going to be. Your total stock is equal to, and if you remember the reorder point, the total stock until you reach a reorder point is your lead time equivalent of forecast quantity consumption plus your safety stock requirement, right? So likewise, you calculate total stock for each and every SKU for a given lead time and for a given demand and lead time variability. Okay. So this was the second example that we discussed. So we have discussed safety stock, we have discussed inventory optimization, and now let's look at the economic order quantity, right? So if you remember, so we have discussed safety stock, we have discussed the cycle stock, we have discussed, now we will discuss the how much to order, right? Which was, I said that dependent upon economic order quantity, minimum, order quantity or replenishment cycle. So here we are looking at economic order quantity, right? So there are three products: television, air conditioner, and biscuits coming from suppliers. And this is the requirement. This is the demand, right? So we need 25 units of television. We need 15 units of air conditioner and 750 units of biscuits. And this is the per order cost, right? And more the number of orders, more will be the ordering cost, right? So if you place, let us say you need 25 units, and if you place 25 orders, 1 unit per order, so your ordering cost will be 25 into 750, right? So you may not want to place 25 orders, right? Then there's a carrying cost, right? So as you hold more and more inventory, you will be your carrying cost will be high, right? So how do we arrive at a quantity which should be an economic order quantity, which will minimize both holding cost and your carrying cost and the ordering cost, right? So we remember the economic order quantity was root square of 2 into d into k upon h, where h was your carrying cost or holding cost. So when you apply that formula, it says that 9 units should be your economic order quantity, which will minimize your total cost associated with the inventory, right? So 9 units in case of television. So while you need 25 units, you will be placing an order for 9 units. So 9, 9, right? 9 and 9, 18. And the last order could be for 7 units, right? And that is what will maximize your, minimize your total cost. Okay. And now we look at the example of total cost of ownership, right? So in total cost of ownership, what we discussed was that we should not evaluate the supplier only from the price at which the product is being offered, but look overall, total cost of ownership in terms of acquisition, in terms of post, sell benefit and everything. So this is an example. So there's a product television and there are 5 suppliers and we want to buy 20 units. So supplier A is providing 20 units at per unit cost of 37,000. Supplier B is providing at 35,000, supplier C at 36, supplier D at 36,500, and supplier E at 34, right? And if we have to rank them as per the unit cost, the cheapest or the lowest cost is given by supplier E, so hence we rank it number 1. And supplier B is number 2 because 35,000, the costliest is supplier A, which is given the rank of 5, right? So if we go only by a unit cost, this is going to be the ranking, and maybe we will go ahead with supplier E, right? And if supplier E is not feasible, or if we find some ethical or some other issue with supplier E, we may want to go with supplier B, right? Now, but that decision is only based on unit cost, but there are other conditions or other factual information which is available to us. So there are terms of payment. So this supplier is giving us 90 days of credit. So he's saying that if you buy, product from me, you can pay me after 90 days, right? But supplier B is asking for advance payment. Supplier C and D are giving 30 days credit, and supplier E advance payment, right? Similarly, delivery terms are different. So supplier A is saying you have to take the goods from my distribution center. You have to bear the cost of transportation. Supplier B and C are saying that we will deliver it to your warehouse, right? And D and E are saying pick up from my distribution center. And their quality compliance is also varying, right? So when we talk about total cost of ownership, we also have to look into the benefits which are coming from these 3 factual informations, right? For that, we have to quantify it, right? So we have to quantify and monetize it. So when we talk about 90 days of credit, basically we can monetize to say, okay, there is a certain benefit, right? So we can monetize it by considering the interest rate, right? So whatever is this money, we can earn certain monthly interest rate on this amount. And whichever supplier is providing us 90 days or 30 days of credit, there will be certain benefits. So we can reduce that cost from the unit cost. So for example, in case of supplier A who is giving us 90 days of credit, there's a bigger benefit, right? So the unit cost can be subtracted with 1,316 rupees. Now, when we pick up from somebody's distribution center, there's going to be a cost, right? So here we are assuming that for 20 units our distribution cost, and this is only for demonstration purpose, but it could be higher, right, depending on the distance also. But right now we are saying that wherever we have to pick it up from a distribution center, there's an additional cost of 150 units, which is in case of supplier A, D, and E, right? Similarly, when we talk about quality compliance, so 8% of the time, which is 8% of 20 units, which is 1.6 units, there is going to be a quality compliance, which may require us to reorder, right, or get the quantity replaced. So there's a reorder cost of 50 per unit, right? So when we say 8% compliance issue, so 8 into 20 is 1.6, and 1.6 into 50 is your 80 rupees, right? So that way we can consider a reorder cost, right? So these are additional cost, and this is a benefit. So when you get a credit term, you get a benefit, right? So what will be the total cost now? 37,000 minus this, plus this, and plus this, right? So it is coming to 35,914 for supplier A. And likewise, now we are getting the total cost of ownership for this product from different suppliers, right? While ranking for, let us say, supplier 1, rank number 1 and rank number 2 is same in this particular case, but it could be very different as well, right? Wherein if supplier E was also providing us 90 days credit, this, for example, this particular supplier B was providing us 90 days credit, then it could have become number one supplier, right? So the point here being made is that we need to take into account all the elements pre benefit during purchase, acquisition, and post purchase to look at the total landing cost. Okay, so we have seen the demonstration of safety stock, economic order quantity, inventory optimization, and total cost of ownership. I think I have one more which we can quickly see. Okay. So this is nothing but this is one of the other questions which I had mentioned earlier, which is how much to keep, right, at a certain particular location. So if you see, these are 16 products, right, and these are at various locations. And for this product in this location, what we are given is average monthly demand. We are given standard deviation. We are given lead time in days, right, which can be converted into demand. We are given the target service level, right? So we want to give 99% service level for this product in Delhi, right? And there's another two more information that we have with us, which is replenishment frequency. So every 5 days we will be given a replenishment, which means that we have to stock only 5 days of inventory, right? After that we are going to get replenished, right? The other important factor is that we have to minimum order 10 units, right? So if you look at some of the important observations here, so if you look at this product in Mumbai, your demand standard deviation is 0, right? So lead time in demand is 0. Your lead time in standard deviation is also 0, right? So when your standard deviation is 0 in both demand and lead time, what do you expect safety stock to be, right? 0, right? Because safety stock is a function of variability in demand and variability in lead time, which is 0 in both the cases, right? So safety stock is not required, right? What you only need to carry is a cycle stock. And what is a cycle stock here? Cycle stock is equivalent of 5 days of demand, right? So wherever there is a deviation in lead time and deviation in demand, there is where you need a safety stock, right? So if you look at safety stock, again it's a simple right, like we have understood. So we calculate Z score, right? So we calculate so this is Q3 into R3. So this is the Z score, right? Which is norms of the service commitment, which is 99% in this case. And we have access to lead time variability and demand variability. So we get a safety stock. If we look at cycle stock, which is interesting here, it is max of J3. So what is J3? Minimum order quantity. And I3 into N3. What is I3? My replenishment frequency. And what is my N? My average daily demand. So I am calculating my 5 days worth of demand, right? And if it is more than 10, it is okay. And if it is less than 10, I have to give a minimum requirement of 10, right? So this is one picture wherein you are using all the information in terms of demand variability, lead time variability, target service level, replenishment frequency, which impacts your cycle stock, minimum order quantity, which impacts your cycle stock, right? And your service level, okay? So with this, our discussion on inventory management or inventory optimization comes to end, right? So now what we will do is that we'll go back to our presentation, right? Joginder, all of these demo Excel files are available in your async content. Okay. Okay, so let's take a break. Okay, so now we'll move to our last part, which is logistics optimization. So it is almost 8:35, and let's connect after 8:35. So let's connect at 8:45. Okay. Okay. Hi everyone, are all of you back now? Okay, so now we will discuss about our fourth topic, which is around the supply chain network, right? So we had already seen, right, how do we first, get an accurate forecast, right, by looking at different ways of generating. One is quantitative, qualitative, right? Combination of both. The second is we tried looking at some of the frameworks or some of the approaches to find out the right inventory that we should carry in the system, right, for a given service level, right, for a given cost. And now we will try and understand that how do we optimize or design the supply chain network, right? And when we talk about the supply chain network, right, what we visualize is the flow of goods, right, from the source to demand center, right? And when we talk about the flow of goods happening from source to demand center, we can visualize, right? We can visualize fleets of vehicles moving. We can visualize goods moving from one warehouse to another warehouse, right? We can visualize uh, the regional distribution centers, the local distribution centers, right? And all of these are part of a network through which our goods are moving, from one point to another point. And when we talk about the movement of goods, it is involving vehicles, it is involving routes, it is involving, warehousing centers, right? And all of these, right, to hire or to rent, right, or to get these capabilities, so a lot of cost is involved, right? And again, the trade-off involved in any supply chain network is cost versus service, right? So, and when we talk about service in terms of network, we want to ensure that our customers or our consumers are getting the product in the fastest possible time. And when we talk from a manufacturer or from a service provider point of view, we want to provide that kind of service at the least possible cost, right? So again, there are two big trade-off involved. So when we talk about design, we want to look at the locations, right, where we want to set up our manufacturing units, where we want to set up our warehouses, where should we set manufacturing unit or should we set warehouse, right? There's sometimes a trade-off involved or a decision involved in setting up a factory or a warehouse, right? So once we decide, let us say, an overall region where either a warehouse or a manufacturing unit should be set up, then within that region, what is the exact location, right, in which that particular facility should be set up. So that's about the locating the right place for facility. And when we talk about optimization, we are talking about optimization of the flow, right, which is happening through and between these facilities, right? So we are going to look at basically two different elements in this topic. So we are going to talk about a network optimization model, wherein we will look at how do we identify the right location. Then within that location, how do we select a specific area, right? So for example, if we have to select between different countries, right? Let's say whether China should be the right place or India should be the right place to set up a manufacturing unit or international warehouse. We might come to a conclusion by doing a certain analysis that India is the right location, right? Now within India, what should be the place, right? Should it be Bombay? Should it be Bangalore? So that's given by a gravity location model. The second topic which we are going to look at is the logistics optimization, wherein we will talk about route optimization, right? So there could be several possible routes, right, to service a consumer, right? So when we talk about, let us say, buying from, certain restaurant through Swiggy, right? There could be, and when a rider, let us say, has picked up, our order from one of the restaurants, he could come to our place through various routes, right? But he will pick up the one, or the app will show him the route, which is the one which is going to provide consumer, right, the meal or the product in the least possible time, right? So route optimization is all about selecting the route which will ensure the fastest delivery, at the same time keeping the cost as lowest, right? And the other topic that we are going to talk about is the facility allocation, which is largely about to decide that which facility should be servicing a customer or a consumer order, right? So for example, when you buy from, let us say, Swiggy or Zomato, right, and if a restaurant has got multiple branches or multiple outlets, right, it will try to first suggest you to select a meal or place an order with the restaurant which is closest to your address, right? So for example, Domino's can have different, various outlets around your place, but it will first automatically show you basis your coordinate, basis your location, right? That this is the restaurant where you should place your order with, because they know that it will be, optimum for them to provide you this order both in terms of cost and service, right? And if you're not able to, let's say, find the product of your liking or a meal of your liking, or if it is out of stock in that location, then you can go and choose, other locations, right? So when we talk about route optimization, we can talk about a lot of examples in terms of, rider services provided by Uber, Ola, right, which is all about optimizing the route, right, which is all about maximizing the vehicle as an asset, right? So earlier, when COVID scare was not there, we used to do so much of pool riding, wherein the app used to optimize, right, which is the first rider to be picked and dropped, right? So when we the bottom line is, when we talk about supply chain network, we are largely looking at optimizing the route, right, and deciding, which supply center should be used to service a specific demand point, right? We are talking about selecting the right location to set up a plant, set up a manufacturing unit, and how do we, apply analytics to answer some of these questions in this area, right? So before we do that, let's take a quick, look at basics of transportation and distribution management, like we had seen in case of demand, in case of inventory, right? So when we talk about transportation and distribution, right, there is a very fine difference between the two, right? So when we talk about transportation, it is the actual movement of products, right, from one location to another location, and largely the movement is happening from a supply center to a destination, a consumption center. When we say supply center, it could mean factory, it could mean central warehouse, it could mean regional warehouse, right? And when we talk about consumption centers or demand centers, we're talking about consumers, customer, distributor, retailers, right? So transportation is, and sometimes the flow can also be reversed, right? If the goods are of not good quality, or we are talking about reverse logistics, right, the goods can move back from demand center to supply center as well, right? So transportation is a very critical activity. It is a cost consuming activity, right? And organizations try always, they always try to optimize and utilize the asset. And here, when we talk about asset, the vehicles are the asset, the capacity in the vehicle to carry the good is an asset, right? The warehouse space is an asset, the factory capacity is an asset, right? So they want to maximize the utilization of asset, so that their per unit cost can come down, and they are viable and they are profitable when they are servicing a consumer, right? So that's from the cost front, but at the same time, it's not just all about cost, right? So transportation cannot be only about cost, it has to be about service as well, right? So more, and especially in these times, most of the cases, decisions around elements around transportation strategy and for transportation strategy and policies taken around the service level, right, which is how fast, how accurate, right, and how comfortably we can service a consumer or a customer demand. So transportation is all about that. It's a very important and critical supply chain activity, and a good network or a good transportation network, right, will ensure that the right product is reaching in right quantity, right, at right time, at right cost in consumers' hand, right? Now, when we talk about transportation, there are a lot of ways, right, by which a product can travel from, source to demand. So it could be via road, it could be via railways, it could be via air, right, it could be via water, ship, right? And when we talk about the various modes of transportation, most of the time organizations use the combined or a very intermodal transportation, right? So for example, organization may be importing the goods, right, from China, US, or Europe, and when these goods are coming to India, most of the time, unless it is an emergency or unless it is an urgent requirement, they will sail through ships and they'll use water as their transportation medium, right? So when these goods land into customs, custom clearance take place, value addition activities take place, and then from customs warehouse they might be traveling to regional warehouses via road, right? And from then most of the transportation is done via road, right? So while in India most predominant or prevalent mode of transportation is road, but then there are some specific product categories or specific industries where railway would be the preferred source of transportation, or airway will be, or water will be the mode of transportation. But there are also very niche products where pipeline, right? For example, gas, petroleum product, water, which are being in cities, in states, are being transported through pipelines, right? So depending on what products you are dealing with, what is the criticality, right, nature of your business, you can design or formulate your transportation strategy. But the transportation strategy is all about creating a network, that smooth network which ensures the seamless flow of the goods and services from supply centers to demand centers, right? So and if you talk about the key differences between the various modes of transportation, so railway, right? So today Amazon and Flipkart are also using railways to transport their orders for to maybe some of the pin codes which are not serviceable by air or roadways. So for example, railways are usually used because of their cheap pricing. They are right mode of transportation for heavy products, long distance commodities, right? But we know railways tracking is an issue, delay is an issue, right? They're not as professional as, let's say, some of the premium transporters would be, or air shipment would be. Most of the time air is used for emergency purposes, right? Because it's very costly, it's very premium, and some premium courier services or some urgent lift of the goods, maybe from international locations, are done via airways, right? Now, like in your operations and supply chain management, you would have understood the role of aligning the supply chain strategy with an overall organization strategy, right? And the supply chain strategy is all about how you're going to do planning, how you're going to do procurement, how you're going to do manufacturing and delivery. Similarly, when we talk about delivery or the logistics part of supply chain, you have to have an effective transportation policy, right? And this effective transportation policy depends upon nature of your business, right? So for example, the nature of transportation policy between Apple and Samsung could be very different, right? Because Apple is into, let's say, premium right, mobile phone business, whereas Samsung, right, while it is not that premium as Apple, but they could have a very different policy, right? A transportation strategy, right, in terms of demand centers, supply centers, and distribution network. So your transportation policy depends on nature of business. If you're into products which require cold storage, so your all vehicles through which your products are traveling, or all your warehouses, everything has to have the temperature control, right? Your transportation policy, which will have decisions on demand centers, supply centers, and distribution network, will be dependent on the patterns of your demand, right? Highly variable, less variable, or where is most of the demand concentrated, right? The route feasibility, right? Your decision on, are you going to outsource transportation, or distribution or logistics, or you're going to do it yourself. It's a big decision, right? What various modes you're going to combine, right? And are you going to take certain commitments of carbon neutrality, and all of that is going to impact your transportation policy in a big way, right? So like I said, that when we talk about transportation or logistics route or optimization, we talk about three things. Demand center, so basically it's a cluster or a location where your customers or consumers are centered, right? Your supply center is the place from where your product is going to get supplied to these consumers or customers. It could be, like I mentioned earlier, factories or your warehouses. And distribution network is the flow, right? So from factories, whether it is first going to regional warehouse, central warehouse, then regional warehouse, right? Distributor, retailers. So what is your network, right, which you have designed, through which these goods are flowing, maybe using various modes of transportation, going through multiple supply centers, and then reaching a particular customer or a demand center, right? So there's a very fine difference between transportation and distribution. So distribution is all about route to market, right? So transportation is all about movement. And when we talk about distribution, distribution says that between your demand center and supply center, how many nodes are there, right? So whether it is a 1-level distribution, 2-level distribution, or 3-level distribution. So for example, if you are supplying from your warehouse, to your customer only using one layer in between, which is that of a distributor, it's a 1-level distribution network. But if you are having distributors and retailers, it's a 2-level distribution. If you're using super stockist, distributor, and retailer, it's a 3-level distribution, right? And more partners you have between your source center and your demand center, more and more complex your transportation strategy will become, right? So that's a very fine difference between what transportation and distribution means. And there could be various types of networks, right? So I'm not sure if you would have heard of something called as milk run, right? So milk run is a very popular form of supplying the goods to a consumer. So in earlier days, right, when we were kids, so milkman used to supply milk early morning, right, to our respective houses, and he used to first decide a route, right, and he used to have big container with him, maybe on cycle or scooter, and he used to map a route to say, okay, in this container 20 liters of milk will come, and I will, for this 20 liters of milk, I'll first going to, let's say, service this locality, right? So he first identifies the locality. Within the locality, he will fix the order. Okay, I first service this house, this house, and this house, right? So it's a milk run, right? So on one single beat or one single visit, right, he is servicing, let us say, 20 customers, right? And each customer is having 1 liter consumption, right? Or some of may have 2 liters consumption, some of them may have half a liter consumption, right? So he's sizing the total requirements in one route, right? Mapped all houses, and once he exhaust that 20-liter bucket or 20-liter container, he'll go back to his place, refill it, and then go and service another route, right? So that is called as milk run, right? So are you combining certain customers and servicing the requirement in one route or not? So similarly, when we service several distributors from a particular warehouse, we combine orders for multiple distributors, put it in one vehicle, and that vehicle then keep on servicing. It first decides the route, and then on that route, whatever distributors are there, they get first serviced on first come first serve basis. Okay. So when we talk about KPIs of transportation or distribution, most of the times, like I said, that's about cost, the total landed cost, for a consumer. At the same time, what is the delivery service level SLAs, right? So if the SLA is to service a consumer in 2 days of time, whether, how many times the consumer got serviced in 2 days of time, right? So the accuracy, right? So if customer has asked for 5 cartons, 5 cases, having got 5 cases of the same SKU which was ordered. So KPIs are around accuracy, the KPIs are around speed, the KPIs are around service levels along with the cost. Okay. When we talk about transportation and distribution, right? So one example I have shown, and this example is a real example from one of the company that I used to work with. So you can see the total route, the network from a very high level, right? So you can see there are local plants, right, which are based out of India who are manufacturing. There are imports happening, right? These are coming to international distribution center, which are then supplying to, and these international distribution centers are 2 in number. These 2 international distribution centers are servicing to 12 central warehouses, right, or regional warehouses, and then these 12 CFAs or DCs are servicing to about 800 distributors, and these 800 distributors are then supplying to almost 500,000 retailers, right? General trade, wholesale, modern trade, e-commerce, right? So this is a very simplistic, representation of how your end-to-end network is looking like, right? And they need to optimize this network so that the total cost of servicing, right, a product from this point to this point is optimized, right? When we talk about transportation, logistics, distribution, we talk about milk runs, right, which I've already explained, multimodal. We talk about primary and secondary freight, right? So what is primary freight? So when we service from, let's say, factory, right, to our warehouses, usually we service in full truckload, right? So nobody asked me, but here you had seen, right? Full truckload, less than truckload, partial truckload, right? So when you are using the full capacity of the truck, and usually when you transfer goods from factory to your main warehouses, you are most of the time able to use your full truck because factory is producing big quantities, right? But when we talk about secondary freight, which is, let us say, from your warehouse to your distributors, you may not be able to form a full truckload, right? Because distributors usually don't order in the those big quantities, and hence primary and secondary freight is managed very difficult, very differently, because their routes are different, their volumes are different, and the players who deal with primary and secondary freight are also very different, and costing is also very different. Okay. TDC is total distribution cost, which is end-to-end cost of servicing a consumer, right? Network design, anyways, how many warehouses you should have, how many factories you should have, right? What should be the route, of a product from import to IDC to CDC to consumer. Reverse auction is, there are various routes, right, through which you can service a particular demand, right? So you give the contract to, let us say, some transporter to service that requirement, right? But because of varying price change in prices in terms of input cost, right? The diesel cost, or the Kpis or Opex cost for running that fleet of vehicles. Sometimes transporters will increase the rate, right? But because we are giving them additional or increased business, that is not visible, right? And the cost can keep on increase for you. So what you do is you do auction, every now and then to, publicly put, your requirements, and then bidding happens, and a lot of transporters will apply for that, route to, with their offering, and you can then negotiate the cost, right? LTL, PTL, FTL, anyways, we have discussed. So distribution center, we have discussed there, they are a value add participant in the process, wherein they do the breaking of the bulk, right? They do warehousing, they do inward management, outward management, right? Inventory management, right? Some of the value adding activities they can do in terms of kitting, packing, right? So lot of order management, right? So they do lot of value add activities. There are a lot of aggregators today, right? Who are aggregators, who can, right? Like we have Uber. Uber is for consumers like you and me. Similarly, there are applications today who can connect manufacturers with the people who have fleet of vehicles with them. And there's B2B app in which, you state your requirement that you want to move goods from this place to this place, and you will start receiving quotes, from, let's say, transporters who are having, fleet available, who have experienced drivers who can go to that route, on that route, and give you the required service level in terms of delivering on time, right? And then you can select given by looking at the cost, by looking at their rating and everything. So like we have Uber and Ola for consumers, similarly such aggregator apps are there for, connecting manufacturers and transporters. Inbound, outbound. So when we talk about operations, in such facilities, in such networks, when we are receiving the goods, when we are talking about inbound operations, a lot of things happen, right? We have to unload the goods. We have to, first put them in staging location. We have to do a statistical, sample check quality. Then we have to take a system invert, right? Then we have to do a put away of those goods. So all of those operations around inbound, are called as inbound. Taking the goods inside, right, of warehouse, any distribution centers are called as inbound operations. Similarly, when you send goods out, basically when you are executing an order of any or distributor or retailer, so you have to do a series of steps in terms of downloading an order, right? And creating a pick list. A picker will go and pick, items from the racks or from bin locations. He will update the inventory. The picked inventory will come to scanning location. Once you have scanned, delivery will get created. You will pack it in carton, you will load it in vehicle, and vehicle will move, right? So all of these steps involved in inflow and outflow are called as inbound and outbound operations. Now, many a times companies decide not to do this operation themselves because it is not their core competency. Their core competency could be manufacturing or could be marketing, right? And they don't want to deal with logistics, network optimization, transportation management system, warehousing, CPL management, this and that. So they leave it best to experts, and these experts in logistics and transportation vertical are called a 3PL, third party logistics service provider, fourth party logistics service provider, and they will provide all of these services to you. They'll do job on your behalf, but they'll charge you a fee, right? They can charge you a monthly management fee, they can charge you a per unit cost fee, right? Or there are various different models through which they can charge you, but the idea is that they take a burden off your shoulder, but at the same time there is inherent risk when you outsource any part of your supply chain, right? So 3PLs are these third party logistics service provider which provide you services related to logistics, and four party logistics service providers are the one who are above 3PLs. So they will have many 3PLs working below them, and they will monitor or manage, coordinate all of those 3PLs, right? So for example, DHL could be an example of a 4PL, right? FedEx could be an example of a 4PL, right? And when we talk about value adding services not just receiving the goods, sending the goods out, or calling the vehicles, loading the goods in vehicles, managing. They can provide a lot of value adding services in terms of giving a warehouse management software to you, giving a transportation management software to you, right? If you try and implement or buy a warehouse management software or transportation management software, it is going to cost you a great deal, right? And it will involve a lot of change management. It will involve a lot of resources from your end to implement that system. So what these 3PL or 4PLs will do, they have their own warehouse management software. So DHL has one, Manhattan Systems, or SAP WMS. So they will configure the tool. They will charge you a certain operational fee or a OpEx fee, but you will be able to use the capabilities of such sophisticated tools. For example, transportation management system will manage the whole appointment system of the various vehicles which are coming from different factories, right? Do the whole a sequencing of the operation. So these are great deal of automated services, big capability services which are provided by these 3PL and 4PLs, right? So these are some of the basic concepts that you should know when we talk about transportation, distribution, right? Logistics network. Okay, so we had seen several decision areas in demand planning. We have seen several decision areas in inventory management, and there are some decision areas related to logistics optimization, network optimization, distribution optimization, right? And these, when I say decision, these are the questions, these are the problem statements which people in this particular function try to solve or try to answer, right? And when we say problem statement try to answer, they look at data. Obviously without data they can't answer, right? So they look at data. When they look at data, from that data they generate insights, they create some models, they create some algorithms, they convert the problem statement into mathematical problem statement, try to get to certain answers, right? Or they deploy certain framework, they deploy certain technology to get to that answer. So we had seen in case of inventory management, right? We used inventory classification, we used safety stock calculation, we used minimum the economic order quantity calculation to answer decision questions like what to order, when, how much to order, when to order, right? And what kind of policy, inventory policy framework that we should have. So similarly, some of the questions that we try to solve, right, in logistics, in network, in distribution, are around three areas: so demand center, supply center, and distribution center. So when we talk about the demand center, we should know all of this, right? What are the locations of our existing customer? It is very important to know, right? Because it will decide where you would want to set up your supply centers, closer to demand centers or far away from demand centers, right? If you don't know where most of your demand is coming from, you may end up setting wrong supply centers in terms of warehouses and factories, right? It is not enough just to know what are your existing demand centers. You should also know what are your future potential demand centers going to be, because if you don't know what is your 5-year future plan, 5-year vision of your organization, today maybe Delhi is your biggest demand center and you decide to set up a factory or a warehouse in Delhi, but your 5-year policy or your 5-year vision, your organization has said it is to make East as the biggest region, right? So if you invest all your money and spend all your focus on Delhi, which is not going to be biggest contributor to your business in next 2 or 3 years, it's a wrong decision, right? So you need to know what is my location of existing customers, what is going to be my future set of customers, right? How are my demand center going to expand in future, right? What are the growth that I'm looking at? For example, currently you have a certain demand coming from Delhi, and you say, okay, 2 lakh square feet warehouse is enough to cater to that demand. But it is a demand planning team or your strategy team had decided that Delhi is going to be a big market and they're going to invest heavily, and Delhi will grow 3 times of the market. So which means that your 2 lakh square feet warehouse may not be enough, right? So if I were to set up a warehouse, maybe I'll look at what is my next 3 to 5 years requirement for Delhi, potential, and maybe buy a 5 lakh square feet warehouse instead of 2 lakh, right? So when you know all of these aspects around your demand centers, right, you'll be able to take right decisions, right? Similarly, on supply centers, you may have several plants, right? Which plant you should produce a particular product? Should you be producing the same product in multiple plants, right? Should a particular product be a mono source or multiple source, right? Which warehouse should service which customer location, right? How many plants should you have? How many warehouses should you have? Should a plant be set up, or should distribution warehouse will suffice, or a small warehouse will be enough, right? When we come to distribution centers, right, we are talking about multiple routes, right? What are the potential routes that are available in that route? How many transporters are available to provide their services, right? What is the transit time? What is the safety aspect, right? So these are some of the, and you will see that these decision areas or these problem statements are very, very different from what we had seen in demand and inventory, right? So very unique, right? And need a very different treatment and a very thinking and a very different set of skills and experience, right? So when we talk about facility optimization, like I said, that one is to first be able to decide on what is the right location to set up a factory, to set up a warehouse, right? And there we talk about 2 different models. So one is network optimization model and gravity location model, and these 2 models help us to identify the right location where your facility should be set up, right? So in facility optimization, there are driven by 2 important decisions. One is strategic decision and tactical, right? Tactical is day-to-day, immediate, near future, and they relate to existing supply chain network, right? And they do not require changes in the structure of overall network, right? So you have, you have factories already, you have warehouses already, right? And you are trying to figure out, right? Little bit of change in terms of which route, to change, whether this route is optimum or that route is optimum, or that, should we start servicing this customer from this warehouse, or, so you try to optimize the given set of facilities in terms of factory, warehouses, and routes, right? So those are all tactical decisions. But if, let us say, you are setting up a new factory, you are setting up a new warehouse, you are entering a new market, so there you are deciding to set up a network from scratch, right? So that's your strategic decision, right? So strategic decisions are required when it comes to changing the structure of the supply chain network or setting up a new network altogether, right? So for example, in past, there was one event that led to, most of the companies changing their whole network, right? And that event was GST, right, decision. Because when GST came into picture, most of the organizations, made a dramatic change in their distribution, logistics, transportation network change, right? Because there was no more the benefit of the difference in the taxes, in terms of servicing from a national warehouse versus a regional warehouse, right? And in most of the cases, number of warehouses were decreased, right? Okay, so there are various factors, right? One will take into account, right, to decide for what is the right location, right, to where a manufacturing unit or a warehouse should be set up. So these are some of the factors, right? So one is the plant capacity, right? So what is the potential capacity of the plant, right, which we need to identify to understand the number of facility required. What is the cost associated with a plant, versus setting up in one location versus another location, right? So cost plays an important role as to analyze whether to set up a single plant with high capacity or multiple plants with lower capacity. Demand centers, right? Very important to identify, because if you set up a plant in one location and demand centers are very far away from that location, it's a wrong decision. And logistics cost, right? What is the cost in terms of servicing from that location to your various demand centers, right? So there are various other elements as well, right? So here, while it talks about capacity cost in terms of fixed cost and variable cost, which is logistic cost, but while cost of production and distribution definitely is one of the factors, but future expansion, like we discussed on previous slide, safety and how conducive it is for community or for people to work in that location, is labor, electricity, water, transport, all of these essentials are easily available, right, to operate a factory or a warehouse. Is there any impact on environment, right? Will it put you in trouble if you try to operate out from that location? Whether the laws are supportive, whether you are getting incentives or subsidy, in that location. What is the proximity to raw material and connectivity, right? Is the environment weather friendly? So if your products are temperature sensitive, right, and if you, let us say, set them up in too hot or too cold locations, is it going to impact the quality, right? Whether the environment is stable or not, right, in terms of political conditions. And you may be dealing with electronic products where waste disposal is a very important decision, right? So you will not be allowed to, let's say, set up factories or warehouses in some of the locations, right? So in network optimization model, these are the steps followed to arrive at a particular preferred location. So demand centers are identified, right, and what is the demand from each of those centers are mapped. Then regions are identified, right, considering the various policy constraints. The third step is for each of the facility capacity, that how much capacity is there in terms of demand fulfillment, and what is the fixed cost and variable cost associated. So what you have is demand mapped, what you have is capacity mapped for each of these facilities, right? What you have is logistic cost, right, given if you choose to service demand from a particular supply center. So basis the demand map, basis the capacity map, and basis the cost map in terms of servicing, a demand from a particular service center, you can create a model, and you can get the model to tell you that which is the right combination in terms of setting up the plants. Okay, so these models or these demos are explained in detail in your async content, right? So you can refer to all those Excel files. There are very detailed explanations of all of these models, right, which you can refer to. So the network optimization model is all about finding the, like I said, that between India or China, that model will give you an answer that if India is the right location or China is the right location, right? But within India, what is going to be the exact location wherein you would want to set up your, facility is answered by a gravity location model, right? So in gravity location model, what is the difference is that it refers to the location coordinates as well, right? So the network optimization model defines the structure of supply chain network by identifying the region, whereas gravity location model identifying the coordinates for setting up a facility, right? So while it also takes into account the transportation cost and quantity, which the network optimization model also takes, but it also looks at the location coordinates, right? So while in terms of sequence, it will be similar, but there is a small difference between the two models. So it will identify the region for facility location based on network optimization models, which is, let's say, India versus China. Within India, it will identify the suppliers and demand centers along with their coordinates. Okay. Now these coordinate helps to pinpoint a specific location, right? So after that, rest of the steps are same, wherein you identify the units of product required from suppliers to the demand centers. You map the logistics quantity per unit, logistic cost per unit quantity and per unit distance, and then you get the model to give you, right, a specific location which optimizes the inbound and outbound cost. So these two models put together, which is network optimization model and the gravity location model, helps you get to a specific location wherein you should set up your manufacturing plant or a warehouse, which will optimize the cost for you. Okay, so now we understood, right, that it is very important to have a very efficient logistics network, right? And when we talk about an efficient logistics network, I said that we want the network to deliver the product as fast as possible, as accurate as possible, right, to the consumer, right? Because if your logistic network is not efficient, right, uh, it can lead to a lot of unwanted issues, right? So let's say if the lead time is higher, right, which means that you are taking a lot of time in supplying your goods to your consumer, right? One is that the customer satisfaction is going to get impacted, right? And your network is also definitely slow, right? And competition can beat you there. If your lead time is more, right, you will have to store more inventory, right? And you will have to get your forecast and demand more accurate for that longer period of time, right? If your network is not flexible, let's say consumer has placed an order and it now doesn't allow customer to change the order or delete or cancel the order, it's an inflexible logistic network, right? Now if you look at Amazon, Flipkart, right, we can at any point of time, most of the time, cancel the order before it reaches us, right? Even if it reaches us at the door, we can cancel the order, right? So it is that flexible, right? And even if it is in motion, right, it has left the warehouse, it can, once you say I don't want this order now, most probably it will not reach your door, right? An inefficient logistic network, like I said, that if it is unpredictable and if it is having higher lead time, it can lead to very high inventory levels, right? So when we talk about logistics optimization, we want to do two things, right? So we want to optimize the route, right? Because there could be multiple ways of reaching a consumer. So for example, when we order any product from Amazon, right? Amazon may have that product in 10 office warehouses, right? But it is going to pick up the warehouse, maybe nearest to us, right? Wherein the cost to service that product to me will be the most optimized one, right? So one problem statement is related to optimization, which identifies the optimal set of route for a given fleet of vehicle to deliver the product. The second is the facility location, right? And facility location answers the question of how much, a particular supply center service, right? So so facility allocation deals with optimizing the transportation cost, which involves optimal resource allocation at minimum cost between the various facilities. Okay, so there's a very popular problem statement which is called as traveling salesman problem when we talk about logistics, distribution, and network. And the problem statement is, so let's say we are talking about 7 houses, which are to be visited by this salesperson, and he's trying to figure out what is that route which I should follow so that he has to travel the minimum distance, right? And the distance between the two locations is also not same, right? So you can see that between these two houses, the distance is about 5 kilometers, 5 units. Then between these two, there are 2, right? So for example, this is one possible route which he can, if he starts here, he can go to this house, this house, this house, this house, this house, this house, and come back to this location. There's a second possible route wherein he can start here, follow this particular, route and come here, right? Wherein he has to travel 19 kilometers. In the first, it is 21 kilometers. There's other possible combinations, which is 18 units, right? So it's not a simple answer, right? Because here the number of houses are only, let's say 7, but within 7 also the number of possible ways in which he can visit the 7 houses are going to be 6 factorial, right? And when we say 6 factorial, it is 6 into 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1. So these are the different number of combinations in which he can visit the houses, right? So when we talk about route allocation or route optimization, a lot of constraints are there, right? So one is, when you are talking about, let's say, visiting 100 houses, you are talking about 99 factorial combinations, right? So how do you identify, system wise, that what is the cheapest route, what is the most economic route, for a particular vehicle to travel or for a person to travel? So it requires that much computational complexity, right? Computational power, right? Which is not easily available. then you need to have those efficient algorithms to give you the most optimum route, right? And it is not that very simple, because you may also have constraints. Now we are assuming that all 7 houses are same, right? What if this house, they don't accept delivery from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So a working couple lives in this house and they accept delivery only before 9 a.m. or let's say after 5 p.m., right? So it can become a very complex problem statement to be solved, right? But for simplicity, how do we identify, an optimum route? So we identify the demand quantity at various locations, right? We identify the supply availability at production unit of warehouses. We identify the coordinates of demand as well as supply centers, right? We identify logistic capacity and resource availability, and then convert it into a model, right? And give a particular objective, problem statement to say, okay, the problem statement is to minimize the route and give the best possible route, minimizing the cost to service all the consumers on the particular uh, wave or on this particular route, right? So this is the problem statement related to route optimization, right? Now, when we talk about optimization, we talk about two trade-offs, right? So one is responsiveness, right, which is our ability to handle demand uncertainty, right? Being able to deliver in shorter lead time and give high service level. And efficiency is all about lower cost, right? And be operating very efficient steps in the process, right? So these two supply chains are very different and they behave very differently. An organization has to take a call whether they want to have an efficient supply chain or a responsive supply chain, right? So a responsive supply chain will demonstrate or exhibit a behavior of responding quickly to a demand, right? Whereas efficient supply chain will be to deliver the demand at the lower cost, right? When you are designing or working an efficient network or an efficient supply chain, you want to maximize performance at a minimum product cost, right? But when you're talking about a responsive supply chain, you want to create modularity to prepone or postpone a particular request from a particular customer, right? So when you see about efficiency supply chain, most of the time they'll talk about price, cost, right? Cost, right? Cost. When you talk about responsive supply chain, they'll all talk about flexibility, right? So modularity, right? They'll talk about a high pricing strategy. Why? Because they want to have margins to create that flexibility, right? Have buffer inventory. Why? Because they want to deliver that flexibility. But if you talk about efficient supply chain, they want to keep minimize inventory, right? So two very different supply chains. So has to take a call, right? Where your supply chain want to lie, right? Or it's going to be a combination between responsiveness and efficiency. Okay, so I'll skip this part, right? Okay, so the last part is on the facility optimization, right? Which we had seen, it's all about allocating the quantities, right? So what we had seen earlier in terms of this model is the route finalization, which is the route through which the consumers will be serviced. This is about allocating the quantities when 405 warehouses or 405 supply centers are there, right? So we identify the demand, map the demand quantity. Again, we map the supply availability at factory or warehouses. Here is the difference, right? We also map the cost per unit quantity for different combinations, right? And this becomes a deciding or an objective factor. We also put a constraint to check whether it is balanced or non-balanced, right? So what is meant by balanced or non-balanced? That the problem in the problem statement, the supply cannot be more than the capacity of a plant and demand cannot be more or less than the requirement, right? So if supply is more than demand or demand is more than supply, then it becomes a unbalanced, non-balanced transport problem. So we have to ensure that the problem statement or the equation or the model that we are building is a balanced one. And then when it is converted into mathematical models, so we get the results by solving it. Okay. So in summary, when we talk about supply chain network, right, logistics or distribution, we want to understand different parameters that affect, right? We saw 10 to 12 factors which affect a decision of selecting the right facility, selecting the right warehouse, mapping demand centers, mapping supply centers, right? How do we optimize the supply chain network model by looking at network optimization model, gravity location model, right? And understand the trade-off involved between designing an efficient versus a responsive supply chain, and the problem statement around selecting the best route, right? And in that route, how do we map the allocation of demand to various supply centers? Okay, so in every session, I sort of select some of the best, share some of the best references, right? So most of you would be from a very different background, right? In terms of being from IT, maybe from sales or marketing, right? And here, if you are trying to, let's say, create a career in analytics, but at the end of the day, you'll be working on a certain use case, which can come from sales, marketing, finance, and you will be deploying, right? Your understanding of data, your understanding of framework, your understanding of algorithms, right? Help formulate a problem statement and solve it in a very structured manner, right? So if you tend to, let's say, become a supply chain analyst or a person who is expert in solving supply chain problem statement, you also need to understand the business, you also need to understand the supply chain problem statement very well, right? So if it interests you a lot, right? So these are some of the websites, very famous websites on different areas of supply chain. So this is, Apex organization, which is the premier organization. Like you have PMI for project management, Apex is for supply chain management. ASQ is all related to quality. Oliver White is SNOP demand planning, if you want to understand. Goldratt is all about theory of constraints. CIPS is all about procurement. Gartner is a very famous research organization which publishes the best, which is out there in supply chain in terms of tool technologies. PMI is for project management, and ISM is another not-for-profit body of knowledge around the supply chain. There are various famous certifications, right? So there are organizations who will put, specifically in their job descriptions, that we need supply chain analysts, supply chain people who have these sort of certifications. So you can, go for a CPIM, which is largely into production and inventory management. CSCP is more managerial based certification in supply chain, which is supply chain professional. CTLD is for transportation and logistics, right? So very specific certification related to logistics network optimization that we had seen. And all these three certifications, in fact, the first four are offered by Apex. SCOR is supply chain operations framework. Six Sigma, I mean, it's a statistical way of solving problems, right? So you can choose to, and Six Sigma is offered by a lot of organizations. It is offered by ASQ. It is offered by a lot of consulting organizations in India. PMP and Princess project management certification. PMP is more predominant in US, Princess more predominant in UK, and theory of constraint certification is offered by Goldratt School, right? So these are some famous certifications which can help you, launch your career related to analytics in supply chain. And these are some very pop. So while there are thousands of books in supply chain, but I have, some of the ones which are extremely good, right? So I am sharing some 9 references. So this is Goal by Dr. Layu Goldratt on theory of constraints. This is orchestrating success by a person who introduced SNOP, right? So this person, Richard Ling, was the person who introduced SNOP term for the first time in supply chain. New Supply Chain Agenda is a very good book. It is by Harvard Business Publishing. Again, Class A Business Excellence by Oliver White. Integrated Tactical Planning is more about day-to-day supply chain execution. Demand Management Best Practices is the #1 book on demand forecasting, overall demand. Designing and Managing the Supply Chain is an analytics-based book, and it is by a very famous professor, David Simchi-Levy, who is an MIT professor, who has created a lot of startups in supply chain and sold, to very big organizations. Managing Supply Chains, again, a good title from HBR. And if you want to understand supply chain from strategy lens, strategic supply chain management is a very good book. Okay, so this is what we had seen, right? Just to summarize, in our 4 sessions. So in session 1, we looked at supply chain, Apex definition. We looked at definition of logistics, 4 levels of analytics, right? Which were descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive. Role of analytics, we looked at Accenture survey, right? We covered basics of demand forecasting, KPIs of demand forecasting, types of demand forecasting, process of forecasting, right? Segmentation and everything, quantitative ways. So session 1 was all about demand forecasting. In session 2, we moved to detailing of time series, component of time series. We looked at almost 4-5 case studies, right? We discussed about simple moving average, simple single exponential smoothing, causal method regression. How do we select models? Some of the popular tools in the market. Session 3, right? Between session 3 and session 4, we understood basics of inventory management, application of inventory classification, how do we calculate safety stock, reorder point, reorder quantity, EOQ, safety cycle stock, SQ rationalization, total cost of ownership, example of supplier evaluation, push and pull strategy. In network and logistics optimization, we looked at basics, facility logistic, right? 4 models basically, steps involved in the models of selecting the location, right? Network, gravity, route, facility, right? Cost versus response trade-off, right? And the summary of the overall logistics and network optimization course, some of the recommended references, and TE guidelines. Anyways, you guys are clear, right? So I have shared already with you. Maybe I'll quickly show you, right? So 1 second. Okay, so this is what you can expect in your term and exam. So while 40% of it will be coming from your simulation, so you can 60 marks will be based on your term and exam. So there will be 3 caselets, right? Application based questions. So on the topics that we are covering in async and sync, while heavy content is there in your async sessions, right? So that is your core content. These live sessions were just to supplement, right? Complement the some of the important topics have interaction between us, but async plus live sessions is your total content on which your these questions will be based. So they will be based ranging from easy to difficult, and it will expect you to when you look at a question or when you look at a particular caselet, introduce the concept, right? Apply the concept to the situation, explain it, and then conclude. So try to give a structure, right, to the answer that you will be putting, and also keep your answers very short, very very sharp, very to the point, right? So if you write essays and all of that, right? So Vinay is asking, can we expect safety stock calculation or any type of numerical to be there in term and exam? So Vinay, that's a brilliant question, right? So so you can expect very simple calculations, right? For example, there are some very complex models which are there in logistics and network, right? It need you to have understanding of Excel solvers, right? And it needs a lot of experience, in complicated modeling. So obviously you will not get all of that, right? But for your understanding, you can go through all of them in async content. You have demos, you have Excel files, everything. But yeah, you can expect, I expect you to know safety stock formula. I expect you to know, looking at classification, do ABC calculation, XYZ calculation, right? Fsn calculation, right? When you are given a certain problem statement on ABC, XYZ and all of this, basically you should be able to take a certain decision, right? Similarly, in demand forecasting, you should know simple moving average, single exponential. So these are very simple methods, right? So they don't need you to know complicated modeling techniques or so. So very simple formulas, right, which you can do by simple mathematics and all can be there. Okay, but don't worry. I mean, nothing related to complex modeling, asking you to create models and all that, we understand. Okay. The only point which I was making was, don't write essays, don't write very long answers, right? Understand the question, structure your answers in terms of introduction, middle part, solving the problem and concluding it, and keep it very sharp. Okay. Pranjay, have you floated the feedback form? Okay, I think it's not there. So guys, all the best. Okay, so we will anyways connect on Tuesday, right? Please remember the timing, 9:30 to 10:30, wherein we will discuss the simulation, right? And Pranjay has floated the feedback form. So please, if you can share your feedback. And if you have any question, any doubt, right? And if you're planning to go through the async content and, live session one more time before Tuesday, and if there's any doubt, any question, I'll be more than happy to take it during our debriefing session as well. Okay. Okay, guys, all the best. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Participants, please fill the form before you leave. Thank you.